It's nearly Christmas. The people of this close-knit logging community watch as the '69 Chrysler of Ed and Minnie Marine drives through the center of town. They don't know that their neighbors will soon be dead.
I didn't get the call until 8:30 at night. I had came home from working out in the wet, cold snow and ice and had dinner and was headed off to bed when my dad called and said, "You need to come down to Grandma and Grandpa's." And I knew something was wrong right then. I got in my truck, left my ranch, went down, and there was many things going through my mind. It was spinning fast, I know. Around the corner, and I see all the cop vehicles. Felt like my heart dropped out of my chest and hit the bottom. As soon as I got out of my pickup, I was greeted by one of the officers. He said, "We don't know for sure, but your grandma and grandpa is missing, and there looks like there's been some foul play." I walked in, and I see papers strung around in the house. They kept a bunch of bank statements in shoe boxes, and they were strung out over the living room. Grandma's purse was left by her chair tucked behind the couch. She never left the house without her purse. This ain't normal.
My dad came over to our house and he said Grandma and Grandpa were missing. Their car was missing too. We were all in shock and disbelief.
The Morans had some financial means, and they sold Christmas trees from their Christmas tree field. One scenario was probably that maybe they'd been kidnapped and were being held somewhere. Dennis Hadler was Minnie Moran's son. He was a well-known entity in Lewis County because he was the owner of Dennis Hadler Logging.
He was probably one of the largest logging companies in the Northwest at the time. I remember growing up here in Lewis County, and if you worked in the woods, you probably worked for Dennis Hadler.
I thought somebody grabbed Ed and my mother, and that they would hold them ransom.
You know, most everybody was trying to think the best, but figuring that the worst was about to come.
The very next day, in the early morning hours, an employee at the Yardbird shopping mall reports a vehicle matching the Marin's description. Detectives responded over to the parking lot and they found the car. It is an icy morning. They could not see in the window, and one of the detectives, instead of touching the car without having fingerprints, blew warm air onto the glass. Once he did that, he could see that the car was covered in blood, which would probably be burned in his brain for the rest of his life. There was a red blanket covering the seat. The detectives could see damage from what appeared to be shotgun pellets going into the dash. Mr. Marin's hat that he's known to wear all the time was laying on a floorboard, and still no sign of Ed and Minnie. Maybe they're in the trunk. There's nothing in the trunk.
I never did go see the car.
Did you want to see the car? Did you choose not to see the car?
I chose not to go look at the car.
During the first few days that Grandma and Grandpa were missing, we got together at my mom and dad's house with search and rescue. They had a huge map. We were given a section to go and look for them.
There must have been a couple hundred people involved, plus all the sheriffs, and pretty intense search.
We gotta find them. They're out there, and we know that they're hurt.
We were searching everywhere, but the logging roads are endless around here.
I'm actually scared to get out and look. I was terrified.
I was out scouring the different county roads when I got the call over the radio and said they had found their bodies.
A man was traveling down a logging road, and he saw what he thought was a CPR dummy. And then he realized that it wasn't a CPR dummy. He had actually discovered the body of Minnie Marin.
A friend of mine was the one that found them. He saw Grandma laying alongside the road. And then Grandpa was in the brush, close to her.
Minnie had been shot in the left shoulder and the neck, and then Ed had been shot almost square on in the back.
We go to the scene. We realize that there are drag marks saying they were drugged from their car and dumped like garbage along the side of the road.
When we went up to look at the crime scene, it was ribboned off, and my dad said, well, I guess that's Mom's blood, because it was frozen where she laid. The hard part is they were scared to death in their last few moments together, and then one of them had to see the other one die.
The last time that I seen my grandparents was on the Sunday before they disappeared, and I stopped in to see them. Took my grandfather down to the store, got milk and eggs and bread, not realizing that that's the last time you're going to be able to touch them or hold them or talk to them or see them or anything.
I put my hand on the casket, and I said, Mom, we're gonna catch him.
I grew up in Lewis County. In 1985, when this occurred, I was 10 years old. Ed and Minnie were everybody's grandparents. The murder changed the way a lot of people felt growing up and living here. It bothers you.
When the Morins were killed, the public asked us about it constantly. The question would be, who? Who would do this to two 85-year-old, defenseless, old people? We really wanted to succeed. But we had no murder weapon. We had no fingerprints of suspects at the crime scene. We had no DNA evidence because there was none in that day and age.
There's dozens and dozens of fingerprints in the house, in the vehicle, and the exterior of the vehicle. The majority of those prints came back to Ed and Minnie and some other family members. One of the biggest items that's collected as evidence is that they found a bank receipt in Ed's pocket.
I'm presently out at Sterling Savings. Apparently you had a transaction with Mr. Morin. Could you explain what occurred now?
Mr. Morin called and asked if we had any money. And I said, yeah, we had a nickel or a dime. And he said, no, he would need a little more than that, and I asked him how much, and he said $8,500.
When he got there, the money still wasn't ready, and so rather than wait in the bank, Ed went back out to the car. And when the teller went out to get him, Ed got out of the car before she got too close. She thought that she saw someone else in the car, but couldn't be sure.
When Ed Morin withdrew $8,500 from the bank, the question became, who knew that they had that money to withdraw? What if it was a family member of the Morins? There were cigarette butts in the car. Ed and Minnie did not smoke, and Mike Adler did smoke.
They're going to bring all the people out, and then the caskets will pile up behind them. So you're going to get some good shots of everybody coming out. Recording? Here comes the casket. A couple of the people we want to talk to. Look at the pallbearer. Here comes your guy right there. Okay, make Mike president. That's the bad guy.
Some family members were looked at a little bit harder than others simply because of their history, and one of those was Mike. Mike had a history with law enforcement.
Mike had a temper, a little bit too much drinking and fighting and getting involved in things that he probably shouldn't have.
It made me mad, pissed me off. And I pretty much told him to kiss my ass.
You want to look at someone who had access to the house since there wasn't forced entry. You want to look at somebody that has knowledge of how much money they had. And so they also looked at Rodney, one of the grandsons.
Whenever you have these type murder deals, it's usually always a family member or something like that, they say, that does it because they're all disgruntled or whatever. So they come and ask you these questions. I call it interrogation. It made you feel like you're guilty.
Between 84 and 86, there's a lot of major crime that's occurring in our massive acres of forest land. We got rape, murder, we got the Green River Killer discarding multiple bodies on the side of the county roads out in the places where there's no neighbor, you got nothing but trees for approximately 2,500 square miles. I-5 runs right through Lewis County. The interstate brings transients and criminals that normally do not live here, that shouldn't be here, and causing problems and crimes. One of them could be the killer in this investigation.
I saw a man with a rifle at Yardbirds.
One of the bigger tips we had was from two ladies who were cutting through the Yardbirds parking lot.
He was walking fast towards the trees.
Okay. Can you think of anything else?
I thought it was really strange for him to be carrying a gun across the parking lot. And it was weird that it was wrapped in something instead of in a case or just bare.
This was our first description of a suspect leaving the vicinity of the car.
He had dark brown wavy hair with a small growth of beard on his face. He had on a stocking cap and a green army coat.
Once we released the sketch, of course, everybody's calling in. Everybody imagines that the person they see could be the person in the sketch.
I didn't look nothing like the composite. Does my hair look dark?
We took pictures of anybody who met the physical description of the sketch that we had drawn.
I know that workers that had worked on that Christmas tree farm were suspects also. The police took pictures of them too. And then they made a lineup of, 8, 10 pictures or however many they had.
The detectives gave that photo montage of black and white and small pictures to all these witnesses, and nobody could identify a suspect.
The cops were running into dead ends every time they turned around.
How may I help you?
The police received a phone call that somebody had important information about the Morin case.
I just found out about a guy that done a double murder. I'm talking about my brother.
Turns out his brother, Scott Coulter, he was married in the family at one time.
In fact, he laughed about it because it was his wife's grandparents. He said, "Oh yeah, but I got that bitch. I killed her grandparents. And I got all her savings, too."
We decided that we would focus on Scott Coulter.
He had burglaries in his history, he had violence in his history, and it was thought that he was seen in the area where the car was found.
He wasn't involved in the drug world. We didn't have anything solid on him, so there was no reason to think that if we interviewed him, he would tell us anything.
The detectives devised a plan where they would pretend to be with the mob and that he was going to be initiated into the mob in order to make some money.
We met at the Tacoma Narrows International Airport. We got him in the car and we told him that he had to tell us about something he had done, which was so serious he would never dare tell anybody about us. I told him down towards the Chehalis Centralia area, there was a job involving 2 old people. And our sources are telling us that he might be involved in that. But you have to tell us something that tells us you're the man. This could be the guy. Scott Coulter was about to admit that he had specific information about the Morin case. We tried not to act surprised, but we looked at each other and our eyes got wide. We said, "Okay, tell us about that." And Scott actually said, "Well, I just got him in the car and took him to the Yardbird Shopping Center," and he went like that. Well, of course, it wasn't a handgun at all. "Now, what kind of gun did you use?" And he said, "A 22. It wasn't a 22. It was a 12-gauge shotgun. He had the wrong kind of gun. He was wrong on where they were killed. He didn't have the right answer to anything. You could have read the paper and gotten more right. He wanted to be the guy so badly that he would lie to us, but he wasn't the guy." Suddenly, we're back to square zero. We didn't have any more witnesses. No more people were coming forward. This case is dead.
There was no relief for a long time period. And you'd have nightmares. I had nightmares of different people, different faces.
You get up screaming and fighting. You fall out of bed, slinging your arms. And
the doctors call them night terrors, but I don't think you've had one this week, but last week. Generally, they used to be, when this was going on, they were every night.
I was just trying to take it all in. I was newly married. I was pregnant with my twins. I went into premature labor and they died.
There's always going to be that little hole left in there. It never goes away. I wish it would.
There was a lot of fingers pointed at me, but what are you going to do? It was really hard to clear your name. Makes you very angry. It turns you into a mean person instead of a loving, caring person. I'd just go out and get drunk, end up in a fight. Cops came and got me. And I told them, don't you think you should be out finding my grandparents' killers? They weren't doing justice by my eyes. The rage in me wanted to come out because I wanted to know who did it, so we could go take care of it and get it over with.
You mean take care of it?
Take care of it. That's how I was raised. An eye for an eye. Tie them into a pickup and drag them up and down the logging road and stop and throw rock salt on them and watch them sit there in pain and drag them a little more and let them bleed to death. I dreamt of ways to torture them. And I don't know that we'll ever find peace until we find out who did it.
When I was hired at the Lewis County Sheriff's Office, this case was already cold for 20 years. I'm in my mid-20s. I said, I want to solve the murder of Ed and Minnie Marin. I went into the sergeant, and the sergeant goes, what are your goals for this year? And I said, well, I want to solve this case. The detective said this case has been unsolved for years and years. You might want to think about some other things, like property crimes, burglaries, and I said, no, I'm serious. So when I open up the case, the first thing is going through this massive amount of case file. I'm reading this case every single night, and I'm so fascinated because this is, I feel, one of the most horrific crimes in Lewis County history. We got a robbery, we got a kidnapping, and we have a double murder. I'm living this, breathing this. I want the who, the what, the how, the where, the why. But I'm not the first detective to investigate this case. And so for me, I had to think about something that I can do different.
Hello, hi, is Frank there? Yeah. Frank, this is Bruce Kimsey.
I ended up going through every single statement of a witness saying, I saw the vehicle. I mean, just near Yardbirds alone, you had over a dozen people who saw that vehicle.
Did you see the Morin vehicle?
I'm sure it was a darker green Chrysler or something like that.
This is a small town community. People knew who Ed and Minnie were, and so their vehicle was a very well-known car. I created a map, and I would pinpoint witnesses on the map. This is Highway 12. We start from the Marin residence, and several hundred yards from the Marin residence is the first witness.
He was going east.
Are you on the same side of the road or the opposite side?
Opposite side.
I could see the path of Ed and Minnie's vehicle from their residence all the way to the woods outside of Chehalis where they were killed. The descriptions match Ed driving the car, Minnie in the front passenger seat. They could only see one person in the back seat. Can you describe what he was wearing?
Kind of a green army type coat.
Remember the face at all?
I really didn't pay that much attention.
This is December 1985 in Lewis County. This suspect is in the vehicle driving all over the town. This is broad daylight. In a small town like this, somebody must have seen something.
While Detective Bruce Kimsey was fishing for more evidence, I was kept in the dark. I was still considered a suspect because they felt that it had to be somebody that was close to the family.
Some of the theories in the beginning involved the family. because Ed and Minnie are the type of people that do not share their financial statements or financial information to anyone other than family. They're kidnapped out of their house. They're taken to the bank. Ed requested $8,500. I think someone that would be more familiar with them probably would have gotten more money than what they did. Ed and Minnie are from the Depression, and they had multiple bank accounts, which is a very common thing for people that age. They would separate their money. And in this case, they went to one bank when they could have got a lot more money. Maybe it's not someone that's close to them. Maybe it's not a family member. It's someone that may not know them that well. Ed and Minnie had a farm with Christmas trees, which would bring in labor workers to work in these trees.
You know, part of the reason that they wanted to look at the people that worked at the Christmas tree farm is A, it was right next to the house, and you would have contact with Ed and Minnie, and B, those Christmas tree farmers tend to be somewhat more transient in nature.
Back in 1985, the police officers at the time took photographs of anybody working in the area. Every witness was shown photo montages of these people. The photo montages are about the size of a baseball card, and a person would have to look at this and identify who they saw.
The copies that we had were just not good. They were like copies of a copy of a copy. You couldn't tell who it was.
I went back and found the original photographs, which were in color, and I scanned them, and I'm using software cleaning up the original to make 8x10 pictures. They look better. You can see more of a description on a person's face, make out their eye color, their hair color, instead of a black and white.
You know, that's an area where technology really helped because it was like we had a whole new investigative tool.
Do you remember back in '86 giving 2 statements to detectives?
Yes, I do.
I needed to find every witness in this entire investigation and then talk to them one more time. I showed you 6 separate photographs, and you immediately picked out one.
That was the guy that was in front of Ed Minns.
Did you get a good look at his face at that time?
I got a good look at his face.
You know, it was amazing that as we sat and talked with the witnesses, they knew that they had seen someone, but it wasn't until that they saw the clearer photographs that they were able to pick out who it was in the backseat.
It's all starting to add up, but I still need more information. I think there's a witness out there that knows what happened.
I'm going down to Oregon to go deer hunting. I'm driving around in my pickup, and I have this guy holler at me, "Hey, Hadler." I was like, "God, who knows me in this town now?" And so I turn around and look, and it's an old buddy from high school, Jake Shriver. So I walk across the street, and we start BSing.
I saw Mike periodically. You know, and I would ask him, "Hey, what's going on with their grandparents' case, you know?" After the murders, I always have to pass the Marin's house. My heart would just sink, and I just put my head down in shame. I said to Mike, "I'm sorry, please forgive me."
He said, "I can't do this anymore." I said, "You can't do what?" He goes, "I got to tell you something." And he said, "You don't understand the hell that I've lived with this on my mind for the last 20-some years."
I just had to tell the truth. I feel responsible for causing them so much pain for so long. I still feel horrible. Back then, I was scared. And I was a 17-year-old kid. I never told anyone, but I know what happened. My mother was driving Highway 12 west. A car pulled out in front of us. It was an older car, and they were going slowly. So I said to my mother, I said, "Pass them." So we passed them, and it was the Marins. It was foggy out, but I could see who was in the back seat. They were heading westbound on Highway 12. Mr. Marin was driving. And in the passenger front seat was Mrs. Marin. In the back seat, there was 2 people. I knew them when I was young because they worked for the Marins on the Christmas tree farm. It was Rick Reif and Greg Reif. And I told him a few days later, Greg Reif walks over. He said, "Did you tell anybody?" And I said, "No." I said, "I did not say anything to anybody." I said, "I swear to God." And I had not said anything. And he said, "Well, if you say anything, the same thing that happened to them will happen to you. We'll kill your mother, we'll kill your brothers, we'll kill your father, and then we'll kill you." The Reif brothers started driving by our house almost daily. They kill these sweet, innocent, elderly people. They're not going to stop after that. They're going to kill my whole damn family. I mean, I started carrying a gun since I was 17 years old because of the Reif brothers. If I had left the house and I didn't have a gun, I was 5 miles away, I'd turn around and go back and get one. But I am always packing, still to this day. You know.
You wearing a gun now?
I don't have a gun now, but I have one in the drawer behind me. So. I knew they did it.
It's all starting to add up, and then Jake Shriver comes to the office and he gives a statement. Jake Shriver's statement is huge because in addition to seeing Rick and Greg Reif in the Marin vehicle, Jake ended up being threatened by the suspects. And what they said was, "We'll kill you, we kill your mother," just like Ed and Minnie Marin. And that is like one of the first admission statements that I ever heard them say. Just blew that case wide open. This is my theory of what happened. Rick Reif and his brother, Greg, they were known drug addicts and criminals in the area. The Reifs knew who Ed and Minnie were because of Dennis Hadler and Hadler Logging. And so they knew there'd be money. That night, the Reif brothers knocked on the door. When they get into the house, they discovered bank statements, but there's no money. In the morning, they're kidnapped out of their house. They're taken to the bank. They get the money, and they take them up this logging road. They were killed inside their own vehicle. Minnie was shot in her back, and the pellets went through her body and came out portion of her upper shoulder and face. Ed was shot dead center in the back. Bodies were dragged out into the woods and dumped. Then they turn around and come back to Yardbirds parking lot. Short time later, they leave and they move up to Alaska.
In my eyes, there's only one place them 2 brothers deserve to be, and they both need to be in the ground. These son of bitches are still sitting there living, and they took something out of my life that I'll never get back, that none of my family will ever get back. I found out through the investigation that the Reif brothers were up in Alaska. And so I went to Alaska. Some things just need to be done. And I ain't never gonna be at rest or at peace until they're all dead. I had found out the area the Reif brothers were in. I was going to take care of the situation. I was going to take them, kill them, feed them to the crabs, leave it at that. and walk away.
After all these witnesses identifying either Rick or Greg Reif, I finally had enough information to go to the prosecutor and request a warrant to arrest them for the murders of Ed and Minnie.
The thought never leaves your mind about who killed your grandparents. I would spend my nights going through bars, trying to find out where they lived. Most people either hadn't heard of them or didn't want to admit that they heard of them. And by right so, they needed to be scared of them because they wouldn't give a shit about pulling the trigger on me or you or anybody.
We have the warrants, we're good to go. So we start booking the flights to go up to Alaska. And this is when I discovered that John Gregory Reif had died.
When that news came out, it was kind of a blow.
I was just thinking, what are the chances? Could we get a little bit of luck here? You know, we spent all these years working up to this, and the day we get the warrant, he's dead. But I knew that Rick Reif was still alive, so we knew we had to get on this now. And so we fly up to King Salmon, Alaska, where Rick Reif was living.
I got a phone call from my dad, and he says, I know what you're doing up there, and this ain't the way to handle it, and you need to get your ass back down here and be with your family. You know damn good and well that Grandma and Grandpa wouldn't want you handling it this way.
When Mike was in Alaska, I think Mike would have done him in. That would be an awful burden to have all the rest of Mike's life.
I really don't know what made me turn the cheek and go the other way. Greg had died, and that really pissed me off, that he didn't have to come down and face the music. But somebody was trying to send me a message to get out of there, and that's what I did.
We're walking down a gravel driveway of Rick Reif. It was pretty surreal. This is 10 years of my life hunting down the killer, not knowing how this is gonna go. I'm scared that he's gonna grab a gun, something bad's gonna happen. If I walk up to the door, I see beer cans and a hatchet. The Alaska State investigator knocks 2 or 3 times, and the door creaks open. I'm thinking, oh boy, this is not gonna go good. And you can hear a male's voice say, "Who the is it?" He stands up, and he looks a lot different from what I expected. He has tubes going into his nose. He's on an oxygen machine. We tell him we have a warrant for 2 counts of murder, robbery, kidnapping, and he is so matter of fact. At this point, the state investigator advises him he's under arrest. And the only thing he says, well, looks like I'm gonna need my medications. I said, do you ever think all these years that detectives would knock on your door? And he said, well, yeah. When that sentencing and verdict came down on Rick Reif, I've never sensed any feeling like that in my career. I was just really proud of our community, proud of our system.
Kimsey and the Lewis County detectives finally delivered justice as Rick Reif is in prison for the murder of Ed and Minnie. Their greatest hope, though, is that it may finally bring the Marine family some peace.
Hello, young lady.
Hey there.
Hello, Denise.
Oh.
How you been?
I'm better now. I told you on the phone it'd be better when you got here. Oh my gosh. Grandma and Grandpa are alive in my heart and in my fondest memories. But without them here, the family hasn't been together again. So it was time to get together and maybe have a Hadler cousin reunion.
Is that Michael? Oh, God. I haven't seen him for a long time.
I haven't either.
Oh, hi, kid. I guess what people don't really realize is my grandparents were only the first victim. Then you got the family. You know me, let's have a drink.
Let's go. If I could go back and speak to my grandmother, I would tell her I have 5 grandkids and I'm living the life I've always dreamed of. I think she'd be proud of me.
The summer sun beat down heavily on the quiet suburban streets of Wiley, Texas in June of 1980. It was a kind of idyllic community where neighbors knew each other by name and doors were rarely locked at night. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of freshly cut grass, masking the unimaginable horror that was about to unfold behind closed doors, a seemingly perfect suburban home. This was a place of church gatherings, school events, and quiet domesticity, a stark contrast to the brutal reality of the crime that would shock the entire nation. At the center of this impending tragedy was Candy Montgomery, a woman who epitomized the ideal suburban housewife. She was deeply involved in her local church, organizing various events and participating actively in the choir. Her life appeared to be a flawless tapestry of family duties and community service. She was married to Pat Montgomery, a highly successful electrical engineer, and they had 2 beautiful children. From the outside looking in, her existence was a perfect portrait of American bliss, filled with summer barbecues, Sunday services, and a comfortable predictability that offered a deep sense of security to all around. However, beneath this polished veneer of utter perfection lay a growing sense of profound dissatisfaction and overwhelming boredom. Candy felt an emptiness that her beautiful home and loving family could not entirely fill. She craved excitement and a break from the monotonous routine of endless chores and social obligations. This hidden desire for something more thrilling eventually led her down a dangerous path of betrayal. She sought out a secret romance, hoping to inject some passion into her predictable life. This fateful decision would become the catalyst for a series of events that would end in unimaginable and brutal violence. The object of her forbidden affection was Alan Gore, a man who also attended the same church. Alan was married to Betty Gore, a dedicated elementary school teacher who was struggling with her own personal demons and postpartum depression. Betty was known for her strict adherence to rules and a somewhat rigid personality, which often created tension within her marriage. Alan, feeling disconnected from his wife, found himself drawn to the cheerful and vibrant energy that Candy always projected. They embarked on an extremely carefully planned affair, meticulously setting ground rules to ensure their respective marriages remained completely intact always. For several months, their clandestine meetings took place in a cheap motel located just off the highway. They would meet during their lunch breaks, enjoying a brief escape from their ordinary realities. Candy prepared for these encounters with the same efficiency she applied to organizing church picnics. She packed a small bag with fresh towels, luxury soaps, and a carefully prepared lunch. It was a highly transactional arrangement, completely devoid of deep emotional attachment or romantic sentimentality. They both fully understood that their families would always come first, and the affair was simply a temporary distraction from their everyday lives. Eventually, the spark between them began to severely fade away as the logistical difficulties outweighed the initial excitement. Alan grew increasingly concerned about Betty, who was pregnant with her second child and struggling significantly with severe anxiety. He felt a heavy burden of guilt and decided he needed to focus entirely on his fragile marriage. Candy, although slightly disappointed by his decision, agreed that ending the relationship was the most logical and practical choice. They parted ways amicably, firmly believing that their secret would remain forever buried in the past, and they could simply resume their normal platonic friendship perfectly. Life in Wiley seemingly returned to its usual peaceful and mundane rhythm for both families involved in the hidden triangle. Alan and Betty welcomed a new baby into their home, attempting desperately to rebuild their fractured emotional connection and save their marriage. Candy continued to excel in her role as a busy mother, attending various school functions and meticulously organizing spectacular church gatherings. The two women remained seemingly good friends, their older children often playing happily together on warm summer afternoons. There was absolutely no outward indication of the intense storm that was quietly brewing just beneath the calm surface. The facade, however, began to slowly crack during a fateful week in June when Alan had to travel for business. Betty, who deeply despised being left alone with the children, became increasingly anxious and overwhelmed by her profound sense of isolation. She struggled tremendously to maintain her composure, while simultaneously managing the demanding needs of a young infant. Alan called her frequently from his distant hotel room, trying desperately to offer comfort and steady reassurance through the telephone line. Despite his earnest efforts, Betty continued to feel entirely unsupported and completely abandoned during his unfortunately necessary professional absence from home. On the eve of the tragedy, Alan tried calling Betty multiple times, but received absolutely no answer, which was highly unusual. Panic began to slowly rise within him as he imagined terrible scenarios involving his vulnerable wife and their innocent young children. He reached out to neighbors, begging them to check on the quiet house located on Dogwood Drive. His anxiety steadily intensified with every passing hour of absolute silence emanating from his usually active home. He even considered abandoning his important business trip entirely to rush back and personally ensure that everything was completely safe and secure for everyone. The following morning dawned bright and clear, completely masking the terrible darkness that was rapidly descending upon the small town. Candy Montgomery began her day with her usual brisk efficiency, preparing her children for their various scheduled summer activities. She had kindly offered to take the older Gore daughter along with her own kids to a local swimming lesson. The plan was wonderfully simple and incredibly helpful for a supposedly overwhelmed mother like Betty. Candy decided to briefly stop by the Gore residence, simply to pick up a bright swimsuit for the young girl, before heading straight to the pool. When she casually knocked on the heavy wooden front door, she expected a quick and friendly interaction just like always. Betty answered the loud knock, appearing visibly distressed and unusually tense, which immediately set off internal warning bells for Candy. The atmosphere inside the normally welcoming house felt incredibly heavy, suffocating, and profoundly unnatural compared to previous pleasant visits. Despite feeling a strange sense of mounting unease, Candy gracefully stepped over the familiar threshold, completely unaware that she was crossing a permanent boundary. She innocently followed Betty straight into the small utility room, firmly sealing her own grim, tragic fate. Inside the cramped and faintly lit laundry space, the ordinary sounds of suburban life completely vanished into a deafening silence. Betty suddenly turned around slowly, confronting her seemingly perfect friend with a dark question about the deeply buried secret affair. The direct accusation instantly shattered the carefully constructed illusion of their polite friendship, creating a deeply uncomfortable and dangerously volatile situation. Candy stood frozen, utterly shocked by the sudden confrontation, while frantically searching her mind for a plausible denial or calming explanation. The air grew thick with palpable anger, resentment, and the terrifying promise of imminent physical destruction immediately ahead. Without giving Candy any meaningful chance to quickly defuse the incredibly explosive tension, Betty briefly left the small utility room. She returned mere moments later, yielding a heavy wooden-handled axe with a sharply honed metal blade gleaming menacingly bright. The presence of the dangerous tool instantly transformed a heated verbal dispute into a terrifying battle for immediate physical survival. Candy stared in pure disbelief as a heavy weapon was aggressively raised, completely unable to fully comprehend the rapidly unfolding nightmare. Panic surged violently through her veins, entirely overriding her rational thoughts and triggering a primal, desperate, deeply defensive instinct. The first terrifying swing narrowly missed its primary target, embedding the sharp steel deeply into the cheap linoleum floor instead. A fierce and chaotic struggle immediately ensued between the two desperate women, slipping frantically on the increasingly treacherous damp surface. They violently grappled for absolute control of the single heavy weapon, pushing and shoving each other with incredible surprising strength. In the confined and claustrophobic space, every frantic movement was wildly magnified, creating a terrifying symphony of pure human desperation. The once quiet and ordinary Friday morning had irreversibly descended into a savage and unthinkably brutal display of primal violence. The desperate struggle within the claustrophobic utility room quickly escalated into a terrifying fight for absolute survival. Candy successfully wrenched the heavy wooden handle away from Betty during chaotic and frantic physical altercation. Adrenaline aggressively surged through her shaking body, completely overriding any remaining rational thought or normal moral hesitation. She felt a powerful primal instinct taking complete control of her entire physical being in that dark moment. The very first brutal strike was a wild and desperate swing intended solely to forcefully create necessary distance between herself and her highly aggressive attacker in the incredibly tight confined space. However, the sharply honed steel blade unfortunately found its vulnerable mark with incredibly sickening and devastating precision. This sudden impact instantly shifted the entire terrifying dynamic of the horribly violent and completely unexpected Friday encounter. Betty stumbled backward against the washing machine, absolute pure shock registering vividly across her suddenly pale face. Dark crimson blood began to flow rapidly from the severe wound, staining the previously pristine utility room floor. The horrifying sight of the massive injury did not halt the escalating brutal violence between the two suburban mothers. Instead, it tragically accelerated the chaotic sequence of events completely unfolding. Candy felt trapped within a blinding haze of overwhelming panic and deeply rooted psychological trauma during the fight. A strange dissociative reaction suddenly overtook her mind, detaching her entirely from the horrifying reality of her actions. The relentless swinging motion continued with terrifyingly mechanical precision, entirely devoid of any conscious human emotion or logical control. Every single heavy impact echoed loudly within the small enclosed space, a grim percussion of unstoppable, deadly, destructive force. She was no longer a highly respected church member or a dedicated mother, but a purely instinctual feral survivor. The surrounding suburban silence heavily masked everything. Betty fought back with whatever remaining fading strength she possessed, desperately attempting to somehow deflect the incoming devastating brutal blows. The horrific physical struggle moved clumsily across the incredibly small room, violently knocking over various common household laundry supplies. Heavy bottles of brightly colored detergent violently crashed onto a hard floor, mixing bizarrely with the rapidly expanding dark red pool. The once incredibly comforting smell of clean laundry was entirely completely replaced by the sharp, highly unpleasant metallic scent. Neither woman uttered any coherent words during this incredibly brutal, physically exhausting, intimate battle for human life. Only ragged breathing remained. Eventually, the intense physical resistance from Betty completely entirely ceased as her terribly battered broken body collapsed onto the ruined floor. Candy stood absolutely frozen directly above her former good friend, her chest heaving violently as she gasped desperately for vital air. The incredibly heavy bloody weapon finally slipped from her deeply trembling hands, clattering loudly against a hard and completely unforgiving wet linoleum. A profound and entirely unnatural dead silence abruptly descended upon the tiny bloody room, replacing the previously deafening, chaotic, horrific noise. Reality slowly began to inevitably seep back into her highly traumatized, shattered mind right now. She stared blankly at the massive, devastating destruction surrounding her trembling feet, completely unable to fully rationally process the catastrophic, monumental human tragedy. The gruesome, bloody scene before her wide eyes seemed entirely physically impossible, a terrifying, brutal nightmare from which she desperately, continuously prayed to awaken. Her previously pristine, clean clothes were now heavily soaked with dark, undeniable physical evidence of the incredibly violent, fatal, terrible encounter. Panic began to sharply, quickly rise once again, but this specific time it was heavily driven by the urgent, desperate, pure need for immediate, rapid escape from the horrifying, extremely bloody house. Moving with a strange, almost robotic, cold numbness, Candy slowly, carefully stepped right over the tragically, violently still body of her friend. She immediately moved towards the adjacent quiet bathroom, aggressively driven by a frantic, obsessive, intense desire to somehow physically wash away the undeniable, terrible, dark guilt. She quickly turned on the shining, cold chrome faucet, silently watching the cool, clear, pure water rapidly turn dark pink as she furiously scrubbed. She obsessively cleaned her shaking, bloody hands and heavily, deeply stained arms, desperately trying to completely, violently erase the physical, graphic evidence of the brutal, gruesome, horrific murder. After hastily, furiously cleaning herself as absolutely perfectly best as she possibly safely could, Candy deeply, intensely realized she still desperately, urgently needed to successfully, secretly leave the dangerously silent, quiet, bloody house. She carefully, strictly avoided directly looking back into the terribly, completely destroyed utility laundry room, truly fearing that the gruesome visual sight would completely, totally, mentally, permanently, emotionally, brutally break her. She quietly, silently, safely gathered her few personal small scattered items, strictly, absolutely, firmly, perfectly ensuring absolutely nothing extremely personally directly identifying was accidentally, foolishly, mistakenly, carelessly left completely behind at the horrifying crime scene. Opening the heavy wooden front exterior main door, she was suddenly violently struck by the incredibly beautifully bright and entirely unchanged, cheerful, hot Texas summer morning sunlight. The outside, innocent, peaceful, calm, unaware suburban world remained completely, totally, blissfully oblivious to the extraordinarily, deeply, profoundly dark, horrific, brutal, bloody, deadly, violent nightmare that had just brutally concluded permanently, directly inside. She absolutely, completely needed to quickly, successfully, safely survive this incredibly dangerous, terrifying, unprecedented, extremely stressful, horrible, complex, devastating, intensely chaotic, terrible situation perfectly, without absolutely any single completely disastrous, critical, highly suspicious, fatal legal mistakes whatsoever right very now. Arriving at the crowded community swimming pool, Candy seamlessly blended into the noisy background of laughing families. She warmly greeted the impatiently waiting young children with a carefully forced, but seemingly cheerful, bright smile, confidently offering entirely plausible and perfectly reasonable, simple, logical excuses for her slight, noticeable delay. She quietly watched them playfully splash within the sparkling, cool blue water, while her deeply traumatized and heavily shattered frantic mind constantly brutally flashed straight back perfectly clearly toward the incredibly horrific and violently dark, bloody, terribly, fatally, terrifiedly destroyed, completely ruined utility room. She had successfully, totally survived the terror. She maintained this carefully constructed false public facade throughout the desperately long and hot summer afternoon. She flawlessly completed her various numerous and incredibly mundane routine daily household chores without drawing any suspicion. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Alan Gore grew increasingly frantic and desperately worried about a completely silent and unresponsive wife. He aggressively called the house phone repeatedly, listening to the deeply hollow and terrifying continuous endless rings echoing into the void. His overwhelming, profound anxiety slowly morphed into a deeply terrifying and highly sickening absolute certainty that something horribly permanent had completely, entirely gone terribly wrong today. He finally successfully contacted several helpful local friendly neighbors, urgently and desperately begging them to physically check on extremely quiet and highly suspicious locked family residence. 3 incredibly brave but deeply hesitant concerned men carefully and slowly approached the seemingly perfectly silent and very dark suburban structure. They successfully and forcibly entered the dark home, immediately noticing a highly disturbing trailing trail of deeply stained thick red blood. Following completely terrifying and grim physical evidence, they slowly, cautiously, completely, carefully navigated perfectly directly toward the extremely, incredibly, intensely, deeply silent, perfectly, completely destroyed utility washroom directly today. What they tragically discovered inside that completely claustrophobic laundry space would permanently and deeply scar their incredibly innocent human minds forever. The brutally and violently mutilated body of the deeply loved teacher lay completely destroyed upon the severely ruined and entirely stained hard utility floor. The sheer unimaginable ferocity of the violent and deadly fatal attack was immediately apparent to the horrified neighbors. The heavy bloody axe remained discarded carelessly near the tragic victim, providing absolute, undeniable, terrible, silent physical testimony to profoundly savage and completely unthinkably brutal, prolonged, bloody struggle that had occurred just mere hours earlier today. The profoundly terrifying and deeply devastating news of the incredibly brutal and entirely senseless violent murder spread extremely rapidly throughout the perfectly quiet and totally unprepared suburban local community. The absolute shocking pure horror of the intensely brutal and incredibly devastating bloody tragic crime completely, entirely, completely, totally, entirely, deeply, utterly, totally, irrevocably, profoundly, incredibly, entirely, absolutely, totally, eventually destroyed their perfectly pristine, simple, safe, innocent lives forever. Candy Montgomery, the seemingly perfect, deeply trusted, innocent housewife, would very quickly become the highly investigated primary central focus of the incredibly complex, intense, and entirely controversial, deeply gripping legal criminal investigation. The immediate aftermath of the gruesome discovery plunged a quiet Texas town into a state of profound shock and disbelief. Police detectives flooded the peaceful residential street, turning the quiet neighborhood into a chaotic hub of flashing lights and police tape. Investigators immediately began combing the bloody utility room for microscopic clues, fingerprints, and any trace evidence that could explain the unimaginable violence. Alan Gore sat shattered on the curb, weeping uncontrollably as the dark reality of his wife's murder settled over his broken mind. The community watched in horror, realizing that the killer was likely someone they knew, someone who had blended seamlessly into their daily lives without arousing the slightest suspicion. As investigators dug deeper into the background of the victim and her social circle, the secret affair between Alan Gore and Candy Montgomery quickly came to light. The shocking revelation entirely transformed the direction of the police inquiry, shifting the focus directly onto the seemingly perfect suburban housewife. Detectives realized that Candy was the last person known to have seen the victim alive on that fateful Friday morning. The pressure mounted exponentially as local law enforcement began preparing to bring her in for intense questioning regarding her whereabouts and her complex relationship with the grieving widower. The illusion of her innocent suburban life was rapidly crumbling away under the harsh spotlight of a major homicide investigation. Faced with mounting suspicion and undeniable circumstantial evidence linking her to the crime scene, Candy made the calculated decision to retain the services of a high-powered and fiercely aggressive defense attorney. Don Crowder, a local lawyer known for his unorthodox methods and fierce courtroom presence, took on her case with unwavering determination. He recognized immediately that denying her involvement entirely would be impossible given the forensic trail and witness accounts placing her at the house. Instead, Crowder realized that the only viable path forward was to completely reframe the narrative around the chaotic events of that morning, focusing heavily on self-defense and psychological survival. The dramatic arrest of Candy Montgomery sent shockwaves rippling across the entire nation, turning the small-town murder into a massive media sensation. Reporters and camera crews descended upon Wiley, transforming every court appearance and legal maneuver into a heavily televised spectacle. The public was fiercely divided, struggling to reconcile the gentle, church-going mother they thought they knew with the cold-blooded killer accused of inflicting 41 brutal axe blows. Inside the jail cell, Candy maintained a fragile composure, relying heavily on the strategic guidance of her legal team as they prepared for the most high-stakes battle of their lives. The impending trial promised to expose the darkest hidden secrets of suburban life to the glaring eyes of the world. When the trial officially commenced in the autumn of 1980, the courtroom was packed to absolute capacity with eager spectators, journalists, and legal experts. The prosecution laid out a chilling and methodical case, arguing that the sheer number of devastating blows proved premeditation, intense rage, and calculated malice. They painted Candy as a cold and deceitful woman who brutally silenced her former friend to protect her secret romance and maintain her carefully crafted social standing. Every graphic detail of the crime scene was presented in meticulous and horrifying fashion, leaving the jury visibly shaken as they absorbed the sheer brutality of the fatal attack. The defense team, however, countered with a revolutionary and deeply controversial legal strategy that hinged entirely on psychiatric testimony and human psychology. Don Crowder presented expert witnesses who had subjected Candy to rigorous psychological evaluations and deep hypnotic sessions to unlock her repressed memories of the attack. They argued that the terrifying confrontation had triggered a severe and rare psychological phenomenon known as a dissociative reaction. According to the specialized defense, the sound of Betty shushing her during the argument instantly resurrected buried childhood trauma, causing Candy to completely lose conscious control of her actions and fight blindly for her own survival against an armed aggressor. The emotional peak of the trial arrived when Candy herself took the witness stand to recount the terrifying moments inside the bloody utility room. Speaking with quiet and trembling voice, she described the chilling moment Betty retrieved the heavy axe and lunged at her with murderous intent. She recounted the frantic, adrenaline-fueled struggle for the weapon and the blinding haze of panic that consumed her mind once the blade struck its target. Her harrowing testimony captivated the courtroom, offering a deeply intimate and disturbing glimpse into sheer terror of that confined space. The jurors listened intently, weighing her emotional words against the cold and unforgiving physical evidence presented by the state. As the gripping trial drew to a close, the responsibility of deciding Candy's ultimate fate fell heavily upon the shoulders of the deeply conflicted jury. They were tasked with navigating a complex maze of conflicting medical testimony, emotional appeals, and the haunting reality of 41 axe wounds. The legal definition of self-defense was pushed to its absolute limits, forcing the panel to determine whether a frantic struggle for survival could legally justify such extreme and prolonged violence. The entire nation held its collective breath as the jurors retired to the quiet deliberation room to untangle the web of psychological trauma, infidelity, and brutal suburban violence. After hours of intense and deeply agonizing deliberation, the jury finally reached a verdict that would permanently etch the case into the annals of American legal history. The courtroom fell into a deafening, absolute silence as the presiding judge prepared to read the official decision to the anxious crowd. When the words were finally spoken, declaring Candy Montgomery not guilty of murder, shockwaves rippled instantly through the room. The verdict meant the jury had fully accepted the argument that she acted in legitimate self-defense while experiencing a temporary and profound loss of mental control. The unimaginable paradox of using an axe 41 times and walking away a free woman had officially become reality. Following the stunning conclusion of the high-profile trial, Candy and her family quietly packed their belongings and permanently relocated out of the state to escape the relentless media scrutiny. They sought to rebuild their shattered lives far away from the dark shadows of Wiley and the painful memories of that fateful summer morning. The community was left to grapple with the lingering ghost of the tragedy, forever changed by the horrifying realization of how quickly ordinary lives could violently unravel behind closed doors. The chilling case of the suburban housewife and the 41 blows remains one of the most baffling and widely debated chapters in true crime history, a haunting reminder of the fragile boundaries of the human mind under extreme pressure. The town of Wiley could never truly return to the quiet innocence it once proudly boasted before that fateful summer day. The shocking acquittal of Candy Montgomery left the local community fractured, confused, and deeply polarized in ways that time could not easily heal. Neighbors looked across their manicured lawns with a newfound sense of suspicion and dread, unable to shake the haunting image of a bloody utility room nestled within an ordinary suburban home. The collective illusion of suburban safety had been violently shattered, replaced by an uncomfortable awareness of the dark secrets that could lurk beneath the most respectable facades. Many townspeople felt that justice had been entirely denied, while others grappled with the complex psychological nuances presented during the trial. The physical house on Dogwood Drive stood as a silent monument to this deeply haunting historical tragedy. For Alan Gore, the aftermath of the verdict brought no true closure or peace of mind, but rather a lifetime of complex grief and unanswered questions. Struggling with the immense burden of guilt surrounding the secret affair that precipitated the horrific tragedy, Alan attempted to pick up the broken pieces of his shattered life for his young daughters. Soon after the trial concluded, he remarried, hoping to provide a stable home for his traumatized children, but the shadow of Betty's violent death continued to loom heavily over his family. The complicated family dynamics eventually led to painful custody disputes with Betty's grieving parents, Bob and Bertha Pomeroy. The two innocent young girls, who lost their mother in the most brutal manner imaginable, grew up in the lingering aftermath of a sensational crime, forever carrying the weight of that tragic day. The controversial defense attorney Don Crowder, who achieved a monumental and seemingly impossible legal victory, found himself forever defined and haunted by the case that made him famous. While his audacious strategy of arguing self-defense and dissociative reaction secured his client's freedom, it came at an immense personal and professional cost. Crowder faced severe backlash, hostility, and social ostracism from community members who could not forgive him for helping an admitted killer walk free without serving prison time. The intense pressure, constant public scrutiny, and lingering emotional trauma of the gruesome evidence took a devastating toll on his mental health over the subsequent years. Despite his undeniable courtroom brilliance, Crowder struggled with severe depression and personal difficulties, ultimately meeting a tragic end decades later that many attributed directly to persistent darkness associated with his most infamous legal courtroom triumph. In the wake of the polarizing verdict, Candy and Pat Montgomery understood that staying in Texas was completely untenable if they hoped to raise their children in peace. The family packed their belongings in total secrecy and fled the state, moving across the country to Georgia in search of complete anonymity and a fresh start. Pat had stood faithfully by his wife throughout the grueling trial, financing her expensive defense and maintaining a united front before the glaring media cameras. However, the immense psychological strain of the murder, the public revelation of her infidelity, and the permanent notoriety proved far too heavy a burden for their marriage to endure. A few years after leaving Wiley, the couple quietly divorced, bringing a silent end to a partnership that had once appeared to be the definition of suburban domestic success and stability. Rebuilding her life under her maiden name, Candace Wheeler, the woman at the center of the century's most shocking suburban slaying, made an astonishing and deeply ironic career choice. She pursued higher education and counseling and eventually became a certified family and mental health therapist, working with adolescents and adults. For decades, the former defendant who had swung a heavy axe 41 times in a state of primal panic listened quietly to the emotional struggles, traumas, and marital conflicts of unsuspecting clients. Operating from a modest private practice in Georgia, she blended seamlessly into another quiet community, never speaking publicly about the bloody utility room in Texas. This bizarre second chapter of her life added another layer of psychological complexity to her story, demonstrating an extraordinary capacity to compartmentalize horrific trauma and rebuild a respectable identity from catastrophic past violence. From a legal perspective, the trial remains one of the most intensely analyzed cases in modern American jurisprudence. The central paradox challenged traditional notions of self-defense, forcing legal scholars to examine the precise boundary where defensive action ends and excessive lethal force begins. By successfully arguing that a severe dissociative reaction rendered Candy incapable of conscious intent after the initial assault, the defense effectively decoupled a number of wounds from the legal concept of malice aforethought. Jurors were asked to evaluate the defendant's state of mind not through calm retrospective logic, but through the terrifying fog of perceived mortal danger and psychological regression. The verdict established a powerful, albeit highly controversial, precedent regarding the admissibility and persuasive power of expert psychiatric testimony in justifying acts of extreme violence, sparking debates that continue within law schools nationwide to this very day. Forensic psychiatrists and criminologists have continued to debate the validity of the psychological trigger that formed the core of the defense's winning narrative. The revelation that Betty Gore's simple utterance of the shushing sound triggered a deeply repressed childhood memory of parental abuse was both groundbreaking and deeply polarized within the medical community. Skeptics argued that relying on hypnosis and retrospective psychoanalysis provided an overly convenient narrative to rationalize what was fundamentally a crime of passionate rage and panic. Proponents, however, maintain that severe acute stress combined with a life-threatening physical confrontation can genuinely shatter cognitive control, causing an individual to enter an automatic survival mode where catastrophic overreaction occurs without conscious deliberation. The scientific debate over dissociative states in violent crimes remains active, illustrating the immense difficulty of evaluating the human mind during moments of extreme deadly physical terror. The macabre details and psychological intrigue of the case ensured that it would not fade into obscure legal archives, but instead evolve into an enduring fixture of popular culture and true crime media. In the mid-1980s, investigative journalists John Bloom and Jim Atkinson published a definitive book detailing the entire saga, providing a comprehensive and deeply researched look into the suburban tragedy. Over the ensuing decades, The story inspired multiple high-profile television adaptations and dramatic miniseries that brought the events of June 1980 to new generations of viewers. Star-studded productions meticulously recreated the period aesthetics, the simmering church politics, and the claustrophobic horror of the laundry room confrontation. Each new artistic retelling reignited public discourse, proving that society remains captivated by the intersection of suburban domesticity, hidden infidelity, and sudden primal bloodshed in quiet, middle-class American residential communities. At its fundamental core, the story of Candy Montgomery and Betty Gore resonates so powerfully because it completely demolishes the comforting myth of idyllic suburban tranquility. The setting of Wiley, Texas, was not an anomaly, but rather a pristine reflection of countless middle-class communities where conformity, religious devotion, and emotional repression were deeply prized virtues. Beneath the cheerful surface of community potlucks, choir practices, and well-maintained lawns lay intense emotional isolation, untreated depression, and desperate longings for personal fulfillment. The sudden eruption of savage violence within such an orderly environment exposed a profound vulnerability of human psychology when societal expectations suppress authentic emotional needs. The axe did not simply destroy a human life in a laundry room. It cleaved straight to the fragile illusion of suburban perfection, revealing the dark chaos when repressed desires collide with sudden deadly survival instincts. Amidst the sensational media coverage, legal debates, and psychological analyses that have dominated the narrative for decades, the true human tragedy of Betty Gore is often painfully overshadowed. Betty was a dedicated teacher, a devoted mother, and a vulnerable woman who was desperately struggling to navigate the overwhelming challenges of postpartum depression and marital estrangement. Her untimely and horrific death cut short a life that deserved empathy, support, and a peaceful resolution to her profound personal struggles. For those who truly loved her, the persistent sensationalism surrounding the trial and the ongoing media adaptation serve as a painful reminder that the narrative of her life was violently rewritten by her killer's defense. Remembering Betty Gore means looking beyond the gruesome crime scene photos and acknowledging the deep, irreversible loss suffered by her loving family and the innocent young grieving children. The enduring legacy of the Wiley tragedy extends far beyond its status as a historical legal anomaly, cementing itself permanently in the cultural consciousness as a defining dark milestone of late 20th century true crime history. As decades have passed since that fateful summer afternoon in 1980, the narrative has evolved from a local Texas shocker into a universal archetype for the hidden perils of suburban alienation. Writers, documentary filmmakers, and cultural historians continually return to the case because it exposes the terrifying fragility of social constructs when human emotions are forced to fester in isolation. The story functions as a stark warning against prioritizing external appearances over genuine health, reminding diverse audiences that monsters often wear ordinary masks while living completely normal lives among unsuspecting neighbors every single day in communities just like yours across the nation now. The psychological ripple effects of the case continue to influence how modern society evaluates domestic violence, mental health crises, and the subtle pressures placed upon homemakers during eras of shifting gender roles. In the early 1980s, traditional expectations demanded that women maintain flawless households, raise children with effortless grace, and suppress personal discontent for the sake of marital harmony. Betty Gore and Candy Montgomery were both trapped by these rigid societal expectations, though they manifested suffering in profoundly different ways. Betty struggled with the overwhelming weight of postpartum depression and a deeply uncommunicated marriage, while Candy sought forbidden thrills to escape the crushing monotony of her prescribed role. Their tragic collision was an inevitable explosion born from a culture refusing to provide adequate spaces for women to express emotional vulnerability or seek support while managing heavy domestic responsibilities today. Furthermore, the media frenzy surrounding the trial laid the foundational blueprint for the modern true crime industrial complex, where sensationalism and psychological drama overshadow the grim reality of loss. The transformation of a brutal murder trial into national entertainment set a troubling precedent for how society consumes real-life tragedy through television screens, podcasts, and streaming platforms. Viewers became voyeurs into the private horrors of ordinary lives, turning complex human tragedies into digestible evening entertainment. This relentless commodification of suffering raises profound ethical questions about the responsibilities of storytellers and the ongoing impact on descendants who must live in perpetual shadow of their family's darkest hour. The line between journalistic documentation and exploitive spectacle frequently blurs, leaving a legacy where sensationalized myth often overshadows the stark, painful human truth that remains hidden very securely and deeply underneath now. For the legal community, the case remains a fascinating and contentious case study in criminal law schools, frequently dissected to explore the boundaries of expert testimony and diminished capacity defenses. The acceptance of a temporary dissociative reaction as a valid legal justification for 41 acts blows challenge traditional jurisprudential frameworks that heavily relied on conscious intent and premeditation. Legal scholars continue to debate whether the defense's tactical brilliance created a dangerous loophole or established a compassionate precedent for individuals pushed to the absolute brink of psychological breakdown. By forcing the jury to peer into the terrifying abyss of acute survival panic, the defense redefined how courts evaluate the human mind under extreme trauma. This precedent ensures the trial remains eternally relevant to ongoing discussions concerning mental health awareness within the modern American judicial system across the entire nation today. The physical landscape of Wylie, Texas, has transformed significantly over the decades, shedding its sleepy rural suburban character to become a bustling part of the broader Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan expansion. New housing developments, commercial centers, and modern infrastructure have largely replaced the quiet dirt roads and isolated properties that once defined the town during the summer of 1980. Yet, despite this massive demographic shift in physical modernization, older residents who remember the dark days of the trial still carry the lingering psychological weight of the tragedy. Local lore preserves a memory of the axe murder as a defining dark chapter in community history, a cautionary tale passed down through generations like an urban legend that happens to be horrifyingly true. The house on Dogwood Drive remains a quiet spectator to history, forever tied to these tragic ghosts today. The descendants and families touched directly by the tragedy have spent lifetimes attempting to heal and find a sense of normalcy far away from the relentless media spotlight. Growing up in the shadow of a sensational murder trial imposes a unique and profound psychological burden on innocent children who bear no responsibility for the actions of their parents. Their resilience in forging independent lives and seeking peace amid overwhelming public notoriety is a testament to the human capacity for survival and emotional recovery. While the media machine continuously revitalizes a narrative for new audiences, the real human beings affected by the violence have consistently chosen quiet privacy and absolute dignity. Their silent endurance stands in powerful contrast to the loud theatrical reenactments periodically capturing public attention across television screens located all across the world during modern times right here now. As contemporary culture continues its insatiable appetite for true crime narratives, the story of Candy Montgomery and Betty Gore offers a vital lesson in the importance of empathy and deep listening. Behind every shocking headline and sensationalized television adaptation lies a web of genuine human suffering, missed warning signs, and preventable pain that deserves our deepest compassion. The tragedy reminds us that true safety cannot be found in manicured lawns, perfect church attendance, or the meticulous instruction of an ideal public image. Instead, genuine security stems from fostering open, honest communities where individuals feel safe enough to reveal flaws, share burdens, and seek help before desperation turns into catastrophe. The ultimate tragedy of that June morning is not just the brutality of the crime itself, but a profound loneliness allowing such dark chaos to take deep root right here now. The psychological exploration of Candy Montgomery herself remains one of the most baffling enigmas in criminal psychology, a stark study in human compartmentalization and adaptability. The ability of an individual to commit an act of unspeakable violence, immediately wash away physical evidence, and seamlessly return to an ordinary routine of pool parties and child care defies easy categorization. It forces us to confront the unsettling reality that human beings possess an extraordinary capacity to wall off trauma and function under extreme pressure without immediate psychological collapse. Whether viewed as a cold-blooded sociopath who manipulated the legal system or a deeply traumatized survivor of a sudden primal attack, her transformation from defendant to mental health counselor remains a staggering paradox. This bizarre biographical trajectory highlights the complex, contradictory nature of the human psyche when confronted with its own darkest capabilities today. Reflecting upon the broader arc of the narrative, the Wiley tragedy serves as an eternal mirror reflecting our collective fascination with the dark underbelly of domestic life. Society is endlessly drawn to stories dismantling the illusion of perfection, finding a grim catharsis in the revelation that chaos can erupt anywhere at any given moment. We read true crime not merely to satisfy a morbid curiosity, but to seek order and understanding within a world that often feels unpredictable, frightening, and overwhelmingly complex. By dissecting the precise sequence of events leading two ordinary mothers into a fatal clash inside a small laundry room, we attempt to reassure ourselves that we can recognize warning signs in our own lives. Yet, the enduring mystery suggests some depths of the human mind remain entirely beyond our full intellectual comprehension across time and space now. Ultimately, the story of the Wiley axe murder closes not with neat moral resolution, but with a lingering silence echoing across the decades. It stands as a chilling reminder of how quickly the fragile boundaries of civilization dissolve when hidden pressures collide with sudden deadly force. Betty Gore's life was cut short in a horrifying manner, permanently altering the trajectory of multiple families, leaving a permanent void in the hearts of those who loved her. Candy Montgomery walked away a legally free woman, yet she carried the invisible weight of shattered past into a life defined by perpetual reinvention and guarded secrecy. As the final chapters of this dark historical saga continue to fascinate new generations, the quiet streets of Texas bear witness to a past that can never truly be undone, frozen forever in 41 blows. As time continues to march relentlessly forward, carrying the memories of that turbulent summer into distant history, the shadow of the Wiley tragedy refuses to fade into obscurity. The intricate web of human emotions, social pressures, and legal maneuvers that characterize the case has transformed it into a timeless study of a human condition under maximum stress. Historians and legal scholars alike find themselves continuously returning to the events of 1980 because the narrative encapsulates a profound paradox that resists simple categorization or easy moral judgment. It is a story that defies the comforting binaries of heroes and villains, presenting instead a deeply flawed cast of ordinary individuals caught in an extraordinary vortex of violence and desperation. The physical spaces where these events transpired have long since evolved, but the cultural imprint left by the brutal blows remains permanently etched into the collective memory of modern society. This enduring fascination speaks volumes about our deep collective need to understand the dark impulses that occasionally pierce the thin veneer of civilization, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about what lies hidden beneath the surface of our own daily lives and peaceful communities across the nation today more than ever before. Examining the mechanics of the trial reveals how easily objective facts can be reshaped by compelling advocacy and psychological framing within a courtroom setting. The defense successfully argued that mortal terror and deep trauma completely dismantle conscious intent, transforming a savage act into an instinctive fight for survival. Yet this legal victory does nothing to erase the profound devastation experienced by the grieving family members who were left behind to pick up the broken pieces. For them, the verdict offered no real comfort or resolution, but rather served as a bitter reminder of how legal technicalities can sometimes overshadow basic human compassion. The true tragedy lies not merely in the physical violence that erupted inside that small laundry room, but in the systemic failure of community to recognize the quiet desperation unfolding right before their eyes. People want to believe that evil is loud, obvious, and easily identifiable, but the reality is far more terrifyingly mundane. It wears a friendly smile, attends weekly church services, and blends seamlessly into the background until an unexpected flashpoint triggers an irreversible catastrophe of unimaginable proportions across the entire landscape of modern suburban American life, as we know it right here and now. As decades pass and media adaptations continue to revisit this dark historical event, our collective obsession with the crime reveals a psychological need to make sense of senseless acts. True crime narratives function as modern cautionary tales, allowing audiences to explore their deepest fears from the safe distance of a television screen or a printed page. We dissect every minute detail, searching for hidden clues or missed warning signs that might assure us such a nightmare could never happen to our own families. Yet the persistent discomfort surrounding the case stems from the unsettling realization that safety is often an illusion built upon fragile social agreements. When those agreements fracture under the weight of jealousy, emotional repression, and unfulfilled desires, the consequences can be catastrophically lethal. The story serves as a permanent reminder that human beings are complex, contradictory creatures capable of profound kindness and sudden savage destruction in equal measure. Understanding this dark duality requires more than mere morbid curiosity. It demands genuine empathy, rigorous personal reflection, and a willingness to confront the hidden vulnerabilities existing within our interpersonal relationships and our communities every single day without any exception whatsoever right here and now in our modern world today. Amidst all the intellectual debates, legal analyses, and sensational retellings, it remains crucial to anchor our perspective in the profound human loss at the heart of the story. Betty Gore was a mother, a teacher, and an individual who deserved support, understanding, and a peaceful resolution to her personal struggles. Her life was violently extinguished in a manner that forever altered the lives of her children and those who cherish her memory. The constant examination of her final moments can sometimes reduce her identity to that of a tragic victim in a sensationalized drama, overshadowing the vibrant person she was before that fateful morning. Honoring her legacy requires looking past the gruesome details of the crime scene and acknowledging the permanent void left in the lives of her grieving family members. They bore the heaviest burden of the tragedy, navigating years of public curiosity while trying to heal invisible wounds that time could never fully close. Their quiet endurance stands as a poignant testament to human resilience in the face of unimaginable sorrow, reminding us that real people suffer long after the cameras turn away and the headlines fade into quiet history books forever from now on into eternity today. On the other side of the legal battle, the extraordinary trajectory of Candy Montgomery offers a deeply unsettling study in human compartmentalization and adaptation. To step away from a horrific murder trial, relocate across the country, and build a successful career counseling others in mental health requires a level of psychological dissociation that most people can scarcely comprehend. It blurs the boundaries between accountability, rehabilitation, and reinvention in ways that challenge our conventional expectations of justice and moral retribution. Whether viewed through the lens of calculated manipulation or profound survival trauma, her life after Wiley remains an enigma that defies easy explanation. She chose a path of absolute silence regarding the past, allowing her new identity to swallow the dark history that once captivated an entire nation. This stark contrast between her catastrophic past and her respectable professional present underscores the baffling complexity of human psychology when forced to confront its own most destructive capabilities. It leaves us to wonder how anyone manages to compartmentalize such profound violence and continue walking forward as if the world had never broken around them during those terrible moments of absolute madness back then in that fateful Texas summer long ago, right here now. Ultimately, the legacy of the Wiley Axe murder serves as a powerful deconstruction of the suburban mythos that dominated middle-class American culture during the late 20th century. It reminds us that manicured lawns, church participation, and polite social interactions can easily mask deep wells of isolation, emotional starvation, and unspoken despair. When communities prioritize conformity over authentic connection and emotional honesty, individuals often find themselves suffering in absolute silence behind closed doors. The tragic explosion of violence in that laundry room was the ultimate manifestation of a cultural system failing to support its members through mental health crises and marital distress. By examining this dark chapter, society gains a valuable opportunity to recognize the importance of open communication, empathy, and professional mental health support in preventing similar tragedies. We must cultivate environments where vulnerability is met with compassion rather than judgment, ensuring that people feel truly seen and supported before desperation ever has a chance to transform into devastating, irreversible catastrophe across our modern communities every single day, without fail moving forward into a brighter future of deep understanding and lasting peace for all humanity everywhere today, right now in our world, forever from now on into time itself. As we bring this extensive exploration of the Wiley tragedy to a close, the echoes of that fateful summer morning continue to resonate through the annals of criminal history. The story stands as an intricate monument to the fragile balance holding human civilization together against the raw forces of instinct and desperation. It challenges us to look beyond the surface of polished lives and recognize the quiet pain that often goes unnoticed in our neighborhoods. While the legal verdict offered closure in a court of law, the true resolution of such profound trauma resides within our collective commitment to foster compassion, understanding, and open dialogue. The 41 blows delivered in that tiny laundry room cleaved through more than just a human life. They shattered an illusion and forced a nation to confront the darker possibilities hiding within ordinary hearts. May we always remember the human lives touched by this sorrow, learning from the shadows of the past to build a safer, more empathetic world for future generations as time marches onward into the endless horizon of tomorrow, right here now in our modern world, today, forevermore into eternity, without ending ever again from this moment on right now. As the decades stretch onward and the specific details of that hot Texas summer begin to blur into the distant annals of true crime lore, the story of Wiley retains a haunting vitality that refuses to be fully buried by time. The narrative has transcended its origins as a local news tragedy to become an enduring cultural touchstone, continually examined through books, television series, and psychological retrospectives. This persistent cultural fixation is not merely driven by a morbid appetite for violence or shock value, but rather by the deeper, more unsettling questions the case raises about human nature. When ordinary individuals operating within the predictable confines of suburban stability are suddenly thrust into catastrophic circumstances, the underlying fragility of social order becomes glaringly apparent. People look back across the years, searching for some tangible anchor or clear warning sign that might explain how a routine morning could dissolve so rapidly into unmitigated horror. The fascination persists because the case exposes the raw, unpredictable chaos that can lurk behind closed doors, reminding every observer that the boundary between a peaceful domestic existence and sudden primal destruction is remarkably thin and easily breached by the convergence of intense emotional pressure, isolation, terror. The evolution of how society consumes and processes historical crimes like this one has shifted dramatically with the advent of the digital age and the exponential growth of the true crime genre. Today, historical tragedies are instantly accessible, packaged for global audiences through podcasts, documentaries, and social media deep dives that dissect every forensic detail and legal argument with microscopic precision. While this widespread accessibility keeps the memory of the events alive, it also risks turning profound human suffering into detached entertainment, flattening complex actual individuals into archetypal characters within a dramatic script. The children who lost their mother, the families forced to carry a permanent public stigma, and the people whose lives were irreparably altered are frequently overshadowed by the theatrical retelling of the trial and the gripping legal maneuvers. Navigating this modern media landscape requires a conscious effort to look past the sensationalized spectacle and remember the real human cost embedded within the archives. True respect for history demands that we honor the memory of those who suffer by prioritizing empathy, ethical storytelling, and a genuine understanding of the systemic vulnerabilities that allowed such a catastrophe to happen in the first place, ensuring history teaches us much. From a psychological perspective, the enduring enigma of Candy Montgomery continues to captivate professionals and laypeople alike, challenging our fundamental assumptions about human behavior, trauma, and accountability. The stark dichotomy between her polite, welcoming public persona and the horrific violence of that June morning forces a difficult confrontation with the hidden capacities residing within the human psyche. Whether one interprets her actions through the lens of acute survival panic, a severe dissociative episode, or repressed psychological trauma finding a catastrophic outlet, the underlying reality remains profoundly disturbing. The human mind possesses an extraordinary, almost terrifying capacity to wall off horrific experiences, compartmentalize guilt, and construct a functional new life atop the ashes of a shattered past. This psychological adaptability, while perhaps essential for personal survival in the wake of overwhelming trauma, blurs the conventional lines of moral retribution and rehabilitation in ways that modern society struggles to comfortably reconcile. Her quiet transition into a life of anonymity and professional counseling stands as a baffling paradox, a living testament to the strange, complex ways individuals navigate the aftermath of catastrophic violence and manage to march forward when everything around them has dissolved into absolute chaos forever more than ever before today. Simultaneously, the memory of Betty Gore demands a dedicated space of compassion and remembrance that stands entirely apart from the sensational legal battles and media adaptations surrounding her untimely death. Betty was a dedicated educator, a devoted mother, and a vulnerable woman who navigated the crushing weight of postpartum depression and profound marital isolation without the supportive community infrastructure she so desperately needed. Her life was characterized by quiet strength, educational dedication, and a deep desire to build a stable, loving family within the idyllic landscape of North Texas. When her life was brutally cut short, it robbed her the opportunity to see her daughters grow, to overcome her personal struggles, and to find the lasting peace and fulfillment she so richly deserved. For her surviving family members, who bore the unimaginable burden of a public trial and persistent media scrutiny, the true legacy of the tragedy is defined by an enduring, unbreakable love and a relentless pursuit of quiet dignity. Remembering Betty means honoring her full humanity, ensuring her identity is never reduced merely to a victim of famous crime, but rather celebrated as a vibrant person whose unique story left an enduring mark on us. The legal and judicial legacy of the Wiley trial also continues to resonate deeply within modern courtrooms, influencing how contemporary juries and defense teams approach cases involving extreme psychological distress and the limits of personal protection. The historic acceptance of a temporary dissociative reaction as a persuasive argument against premeditated malice established a controversial and powerful precedent that legal scholars debate with relentless passion to this very day. It forced the judicial system to grapple with the terrifying reality that human beings subjected to acute mortal terror and severe psychological regression may act outside the boundaries of conscious intent and rational control. While critics worry about the dangerous implications of expanding legal justifications for lethal force, proponents argue that true justice requires a nuanced understanding of how trauma distorts perception and impairs cognitive functioning under extreme duress. This ongoing debate ensures that the trial remains a foundational case study in law schools, prompting continuous reevaluation of how science, psychiatry, and criminal law intersect when evaluating human culpability in the most extraordinary and harrowing circumstances imaginable today across the entire nation, now moving forward into future generations with steady wisdom and profound judicial care for all people everywhere from now on. As we step back and view the grand tapestry of this dark historical chapter, the story of the Wiley Axe murder ultimately serves as a profound mirror reflecting our collective vulnerabilities, societal pressures, and the fragile nature of interpersonal harmony. The idyllic suburban facade that once defined the community was not an isolated anomaly, but rather a universal symbol of the ways modern life often prioritizes outward conformity over authentic emotional connection and mental health support. When individuals are forced to suppress their deepest struggles, doubts, and despairs behind a polished mask of perfection, the pressure builds silently until an unexpected flashpoint shatters the illusion into a million irreversible pieces. The tragedy urges us to cultivate communities rooted in radical empathy, open communication, and genuine emotional safety, where people feel truly valued and supported long before desperation mutates into devastating violence. By learning from profound sorrow of the past, we can foster a world where human vulnerability is met with compassion rather than isolation, ensuring that the lessons of that fateful summer morning are never forgotten as we journey forward into the future together with open hearts and mindful awareness every single day from this moment onward right now. Bringing this extensive exploration to its final conclusion, the echoes of that quiet Texas morning will forever reverberate through the corridors of true crime history, legal scholarship, and human memory. The 41 blows delivered in that laundry room shatter more than just a single life. They cleave to the comforting illusions of safety, suburban perfection, and predictable human behavior, leaving a permanent scar upon the collective consciousness. While time marches relentlessly onward, healing old wounds and reshaping the physical landscapes where these events unfolded, the underlying truths of the tragedy remain vividly intact. It stands as a timeless reminder of the profound importance of empathy, the delicate complexity of the human mind, and the absolute necessity of nurturing authentic human connection in a world that can often feel overwhelmingly complex and frightening. May the memories of those whose lives were touched by this profound sorrow guide us toward a more compassionate, understanding, and conscious society, ensuring that the shadows of the past forever illuminate the path toward a safer and more empathetic tomorrow for all humanity now as time marches endlessly onward into the bright horizon of endless future days, starting right here and now today, forevermore, amen. As the final pages of this comprehensive exploration unfold, the narrative of the Wiley tragedy settles permanently into the vast and complex tapestry of American true crime history. Time possesses a unique and powerful ability to soften the jagged edges of raw historical trauma, transforming sudden, violent events into cautionary tales that are retold across generations. Yet, despite the steady march of years and the inevitable evolution of cultural sensibilities, the profound mystery of that June morning in 1980 retains its magnetic pull. Observers, scholars, and true crime enthusiasts continue to return to the core of the mystery, seeking to understand the unfathomable convergence of factors that turn an ordinary suburban household into a theater of unimaginable horror. This enduring interest is not merely a product of morbid curiosity, but rather a reflection of humanity's deep-seated need to find order within chaos, to decode the unpredictable mechanics of the human mind when pushed to its absolute limits by stress, isolation, and emotional desperation. The story serves as an eternal mirror reflecting our collective vulnerabilities, reminding every generation that the smooth, polished surface of daily life can fracture without warning when hidden pressures are left unaddressed for too long within the quiet confines of ordinary homes across the landscape. When we step back to analyze the broader philosophical dimensions of the case, the central tension between objective fact and subjective perception becomes strikingly apparent. The legal battle that culminated in an acquittal forced a historic courtroom reckoning with the boundaries of human intent, responsibility, and the terrifying reality of acute psychological dissociation. Legal frameworks are constructed on the assumption of rational, conscious deliberation, yet the human psyche is capable of operating in primal, instinctual states where traditional logic dissolves entirely. This profound psychological paradox challenges our conventional systems of justice, forcing society to confront the uncomfortable gray areas where survival mechanisms override individual moral culpability. The jury's decision to accept the validity of a temporary dissociative reaction established a controversial precedent that continues to provoke intense debate among legal scholars, psychiatrists, and ethicists alike. It serves as a stark reminder that the human brain remains an unmapped frontier, housing deep survival mechanisms that can bypass conscious control when confronted with perceived mortal danger. Understanding this complex psychological landscape requires an embrace of nuance, moving far beyond simplistic binary judgments of guilt or innocence to explore the intricate web of trauma, fear, and human frailty that defines our shared existence in our modern demanding and often overwhelming world. The physical and geographical landscape where these dramatic events unfolded has undergone an extraordinary metamorphosis over the decades, mirroring the rapid modernization and urban expansion of the sprawling greater Dallas metropolitan region. The sleepy, semi-rural charm of Wiley has long since given way to bustling suburban developments, modern commercial centers, and dense residential neighborhoods that completely redefine the topography and identity of the growing town. Yet, beneath the glittering veneer of progress and new construction, the historical memory of the summer of 1980 lingers like a quiet ghost, preserved in local folklore and whispered conversations among longtime residents and newcomers alike. The physical house on Dogwood Drive stands as a silent, enduring witness to the past, its walls holding the secret echoes of tragedy that forever altered the destiny and daily lives of multiple families. Houses are inanimate structures, yet they absorb the emotional weight of the human dramas played out within their rooms, becoming permanent monuments to moments of profound sorrow, deep trauma, and irreversible historical change. For the community, the tragedy became a defining historical watershed, marking a permanent loss of collective innocence and forcing a sobering reevaluation of the hidden realities lurking behind closed doors in neighborhoods that pride themselves on safety, order, and traditional family values. In the contemporary era of digital media, instant information sharing platforms, and the relentless expansion of the true crime industrial complex, the ethical responsibilities surrounding the retelling of real-life tragedies have never been more critical. The transformation of historical crimes into easily digestible entertainment through podcasts, streaming series, books, and viral internet investigations creates a dangerous distance between consumer and the actual human suffering involved. It is profoundly easy to reduce complex, breathing human beings into static characters within a gripping dramatic script, losing sight of the genuine human grief, pain, and enduring loss experienced by those left behind. True respect for the historical record demands a conscious commitment to empathy, accuracy, and ethical storytelling that honors the victims, survivors, and their descendants rather than exploiting their trauma for cheap sensationalism. We must continually remind ourselves that behind every sensational headline, court transcript, and forensic analysis lies a real, deeply grieving family whose lives were fractured by violence, deserving of our deepest compassion and privacy. Balancing our intellectual fascination with criminal psychology and legal history, with profound respect for human dignity, is an essential obligation for anyone engaging with these dark historical narratives, ensuring that the memory of those who suffered remains anchored in truth, empathy, and respect. The descendants and family members whose lives were directly touched by the Wiley tragedy have spent lifetimes navigating the long, arduous journey toward healing, stability, and emotional recovery far away from the blinding glare of public notoriety. Growing up in shadow of sensational murder trial imposes an extraordinary psychological burden on innocent children who bear no personal responsibility for the catastrophic actions of the adults in their world. Their remarkable resilience in forging independent lives, seeking peace, and maintaining personal dignity amid persistent public fascination stands as a powerful testament to the indomitable strength of the human spirit. While the media machine periodically revitalizes a narrative for new audiences, the real human beings affected by the violence have consistently chosen quiet privacy, quiet endurance, and a forward-looking focus on building meaningful lives. Their ability to transcend the dark legacy of the past highlights the profound human capacity for renewal, proving that catastrophe does not have to dictate the entirety of a family's generational story. This quiet triumph over adversity offers a poignant counter-narrative to the sensationalized theatricality of the courtroom drama, reminding us that genuine human recovery is a slow, courageous process rooted in love, resilience, and a quiet pursuit of an ordinary, peaceful existence. Ultimately, the lessons embedded within the Wiley tragedy extend far beyond the specifics of a single courtroom battle or a gruesome summer morning, offering timeless insights into the importance of authentic human connection and genuine mental and emotional well-being. The idyllic suburban facade that masks the deep isolation, postpartum struggles, and unexpressed despair of the individuals involved serves as a powerful warning against prioritizing superficial perfection over genuine emotional well-being. When societal expectations demand the suppression of vulnerability and personal struggle behind a polished mask of happiness, the pressure builds silently until it reaches a catastrophic boiling point. Cultivating truly safe, supportive communities requires an intentional commitment to open communication, active listening, and accessible mental health resources where all individuals feel valued and supported long before desperation mutates into violence. By examining the tragic consequences of emotional repression and unaddressed psychological crises, we gain a vital opportunity to foster healthier relationships, more empathetic neighborhoods, and a culture that embraces human imperfection with deep compassion. The ultimate legacy of the tragedy must be a renewed dedication to building a world where no one feels so utterly alone, trapped, or invisible that they cannot find help, understanding, and hope when navigating life's most difficult, overwhelming challenges. As we bring this extensive 8-part exploration to its final, resonant conclusion, the echoes of that fateful Texas summer morning continue to whisper through the corridors of time, inviting quiet, thoughtful reflection on the profound complexities of the human heart. The 41 blows delivered in that laundry room cleaved through more than just a single human life. They shattered the comforting illusions of suburban perfection and forced a nation to confront the dark, unpredictable chaos that can reside within ordinary, well-meaning hearts when pushed to the absolute edge of existence. While time marches endlessly forward, reshaping landscapes and healing old wounds, the profound truths of the tragedy remain vividly intact, serving as an eternal reminder of the delicate fragility of modern civilization and the absolute necessity of nurturing radical empathy, compassion, and open understanding in our daily lives. May the memories of those whose lives were touched by this profound sorrow guide us toward a safer, more conscious society, ensuring that the shadows of the past forever illuminate the path toward a brighter, more compassionate horizon for all humanity as we journey onward into the endless stream of tomorrow, right here now in our modern world, today, forevermore. As we approach the ultimate horizon of this expansive chronicle, the chilling narrative of the Wiley tragedy settles into a profound quietude within the archives of history. The decades that have steadily accumulated since that fateful June morning in 1980 have transformed a localized Texas nightmare into an archetypal touchstone of modern true crime lore. Yet, beneath the layers of legal analysis, psychological dissection, and cultural reinterpretation, the core of the story remains anchored in a stark, unyielding reality of human sorrow and irreversible loss. Time possesses a remarkable capacity to soften the sharpest edges of historical trauma, turning raw horror into distant narrative, but can never completely erase the foundational gravity of the events that transpire behind those ordinary suburban doors. The town of Wiley has expanded and modernized beyond recognition, its dirt roads replaced by sprawling concrete and bustling commercial centers, yet the ghostly echoes of 41 blows continue to resonate through the collective memory of anyone who seeks to understand the darker, more fragile dimensions of the human experience. This final reflection invites us to look past the sensationalism, the courtroom drama, and the media frenzy to contemplate the enduring truths that remain long after the headlines have faded into the silent pages of yesterday, reminding us of profound responsibility we carry when examining the broken lives of others. The enduring psychological enigma at the heart of this historic case challenges our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of human behavior, societal conformity, and the hidden thresholds of endurance. We are culturally conditioned to believe that danger wears an obvious, terrifying face, that monsters are easily distinguished from respectable community members by their visible malice or social deviance. The shocking revelation that a beloved church member, devoted mother, and seemingly model housewife could be at the center of such extreme, unmitigated violence shatters this comforting illusion completely. It forces us to confront the unsettling possibility that extreme stress, emotional starvation, and acute terror can push ordinary minds into terrifying territories where traditional morality and conscious control dissolve into pure survival instinct. Whether one views the pivotal moments in that bloody laundry room through the lens of calculated malice or a sudden, catastrophic dissociative break, the underlying implication remains deeply disturbing. It suggests that the civilized veneer we wear so proudly in public is remarkably thin, supported only by fragile social agreements that can instantly fracture when internal pressures reach a boiling point. This realization leaves an indelible mark on our collective psyche, fueling a perpetual fascination with cases that expose the hidden monsters lurking quietly within ordinary neighborhoods across our modern world. Beyond the individual psychology of the participants, the broader sociological dimensions of the narrative offer a piercing critique of the suffocating pressures imposed by mid-20th century suburban culture. The rigid expectations placed upon women during that era demanded an impossible perfection, flawless housekeeping, effortless maternal grace, and the cheerful suppression of any personal discontent or emotional turmoil for the sake of marital and social harmony. Both Betty Gore and Candy Montgomery were caught within the grinding gears of this unrelenting cultural machinery, albeit manifesting their profound internal struggles in radically different ways. Betty wrestled with the isolating weight of postpartum depression and a distant marital dynamic, while Candy saw forbidden thrills to escape the crushing monotony of her prescribed domestic routine. Their fatal collision was not merely an isolated interpersonal conflict, but a catastrophic explosion born from a rigid social system that failed to provide safe, compassionate outlets for female vulnerability, mental health crises, or authentic emotional expression. Examining this tragic dynamic reminds contemporary society how vital it is to dismantle toxic structures of perfectionism, fostering instead environments where people feel genuinely supported, seen, and heard long before isolation transforms into irreversible desperation. As true crime continues its exponential expansion as a dominant cultural phenomenon in the digital age, the ethical responsibilities of storytellers, documentarians, and historians become increasingly paramount. The ease with which real human suffering is packaged, distributed, and consumed as evening entertainment creates a dangerous ethical distance between consumer and the raw, bleeding reality of the tragedy. It is profoundly easy to reduce complex, grieving human beings into static characters within a gripping narrative arc, losing sight of the permanent scars carried by those who survived the violence. True respect for history demands a conscious commitment to empathy, accuracy, and ethical storytelling that honors the victims and their descendants rather than exploiting their pain for cheap theatrical thrills or sensational shock value. We must continually remind ourselves that behind every forensic report, court transcript, and dramatic reenactment lies a real family whose lives were shattered in an instant, deserving of profound compassion, privacy, and lasting dignity. Balancing our intellectual curiosity with an unwavering dedication to human respect ensures that the retelling of dark historical events serves a higher purpose, educating future generations about the importance of empathy and human fragility. The descendants and family members whose lives were directly touched by the Wiley tragedy have spent lifetimes navigating the long, arduous journey toward healing, stability, and emotional recovery far away from the blinding glare of public notoriety. Growing up in the shadow of a sensational murder trial imposes an extraordinary psychological burden on innocent children who bear no personal responsibility for the catastrophic actions of the adults in their world. Their remarkable resilience in forging independent lives, seeking peace, and maintaining personal dignity amid persistent public fascination stands as a powerful testament to the indomitable strength of the human spirit. While the media machine periodically revitalizes a narrative for new audiences, the real human beings affected by the violence have consistently chosen quiet privacy, quiet endurance, and a forward-looking focus on building meaningful lives. Their ability to transcend the dark legacy of the past highlights the profound human capacity for renewal, proving that catastrophe does not have to dictate the entirety of a family's generational story. This quiet triumph over adversity offers a poignant counter-narrative to sensationalize the theatricality of the courtroom drama, reminding us that genuine human recovery is a courageous process rooted in love, resilience, and a quiet pursuit of an ordinary, peaceful existence. Ultimately, the enduring legacy of this dark historical chapter serves as a profound mirror reflecting our collective vulnerabilities, societal pressures, and the fragile nature of interpersonal harmony. The idyllic suburban facade that once defined the community was not an isolated anomaly, but rather a universal symbol of the ways modern life often prioritizes outward conformity over authentic emotional connection and mental health support. When individuals are forced to suppress their deepest struggles, doubts, and despairs behind a polished mask of perfection, the pressure builds silently until an unexpected flashpoint shatters the illusion into a million irreversible pieces. The tragedy urges us to cultivate communities rooted in radical empathy, open communication, and genuine emotional safety, where people feel truly valued and supported long before desperation mutates into devastating violence. By learning from the profound sorrow of the past, we can foster a world where human vulnerability is met with compassion rather than isolation, ensuring that the lessons of that fateful summer morning are never forgotten as we journey forward into the future together with open hearts and mindful awareness every single day. As we bring this extensive 9-part chronicle to its final and definitive conclusion, the enduring echoes of that fateful Texas summer morning will forever reverberate through the corridors of true crime history, legal scholarship, and human memory. The 41 blows delivered in that laundry room shattered more than just a single life. They cleave to the comforting illusions of safety, suburban perfection, and predictable human behavior, leaving a permanent scar upon the collective consciousness of society. While time marches relentlessly onward, healing old wounds and reshaping the physical landscapes where these events unfolded, the underlying truths of the tragedy remain vividly intact, serving as a timeless reminder of the profound importance of empathy, the delicate complexity of the human mind, and the absolute necessity of nurturing authentic human connection in a world that can often feel overwhelmingly complex and frightening. May the memories of those whose lives were touched by this profound sorrow guide us toward a more compassionate, understanding, and conscious society, ensuring that the shadows of the past forever illuminate the path toward a safer and more empathetic tomorrow for all humanity now as time marches endlessly onward into the bright horizon of endless future days. As we stand at the absolute final threshold of this extensive chronicle, the haunting narrative of the Wiley tragedy achieves a profound and permanent stillness within the vast annals of true crime history. The long march of decades since that fateful June morning in 1980 has slowly transformed a localized Texas nightmare into an enduring cultural archetype, examining the darkest intersections of human behavior, suburban isolation, and sudden primal violence. Yet, Beneath the endless layers of legal scholarship, psychological dissection, and popular media retellings, the core of the story remains anchored in an unyielding reality of human sorrow, shattered lives, and irreversible loss. Time possesses a unique and powerful capacity to soften the jagged edges of historical trauma, turning raw horror into distant narrative. But it can never completely erase the foundational gravity of the events that transpire behind those ordinary suburban doors. The town of Wiley has expanded beyond all recognition. Its quiet dirt roads replaced by sprawling concrete and modern commercial hubs. But the ghostly echoes of 41 blows continue to resonate to the collective memory of anyone seeking to understand the fragile dimensions of the human experience today, right here in our modern world forevermore. The enduring psychological enigma at the very center of this historic case continues to challenge our fundamental assumptions about human behavior, societal conformity, and the hidden thresholds of endurance. We are culturally conditioned to believe that danger wears an obvious, terrifying face, that monsters are easily distinguished from respectable community members by their visible malice or social deviance. The shocking revelation that a beloved church member, devoted mother, and seemingly model housewife could be at the center of such extreme, unmitigated violence shatters this comforting illusion completely. It forces us to confront the unsettling possibility that extreme stress, emotional starvation, and acute terror can push ordinary minds into terrifying territories where traditional morality and conscious control dissolve into pure survival instinct. Whether one views the pivotal moments in that bloody laundry room through the lens of calculated malice or a sudden, catastrophic dissociative break, the underlying implication remains deeply disturbing. It suggests that the civilized veneer we wear so proudly in public is remarkably thin, supported only by fragile social agreements that can instantly fracture when internal pressures reach a boiling point across our modern world today, right here in this grand, epic true crime narrative journey, forevermore today. Beyond individual psychology, the broader sociological dimensions of this narrative offer a piercing critique of the suffocating pressures imposed by suburban culture during that era. The rigid expectations placed upon women demanded an impossible perfection featuring flawless housekeeping, effortless maternal grace, and the cheerful suppression of personal discontent for the sake of marital harmony. Both Betty Gore and Candy Montgomery were caught within the grinding gears of this unrelenting cultural machinery, manifesting their profound internal struggles in radically different ways. Betty wrestled with the isolating weight of postpartum depression and a distant marital dynamic, while Candy sought forbidden thrills to escape the crushing monotony of her prescribed domestic routine. Their fatal collision was not merely an isolated interpersonal conflict, but a catastrophic explosion born from a rigid social system failing to provide safe, compassionate outlets for female vulnerability, mental health crises, or authentic emotional expression. Examining this tragic dynamic reminds contemporary society how vital it is to dismantle toxic structures of perfectionism, fostering instead environments where people feel genuinely supported, seen, and heard long before isolation transforms into irreversible desperation across our world today, right here, right now, in this modern era, forevermore today, right now, forevermore. As true crime continues its exponential expansion as a dominant cultural phenomenon in the digital age, the ethical responsibilities of storytellers and historians become paramount. The ease with which real human suffering is packaged, distributed, and consumed as evening entertainment creates a dangerous ethical distance between the consumer and the raw reality of the tragedy. It is profoundly easy to reduce complex, grieving human beings into static characters within a gripping narrative arc, losing sight of the permanent scars carried by those who survived the violence. True respect for history demands a conscious commitment to empathy, accuracy, and ethical storytelling that honors the victims and their descendants rather than exploiting their pain for cheap theatrical thrills or sensational shock value. We must continually remind ourselves that behind every forensic report, court transcript, and dramatic reenactment lies a real family whose lives were shattered in an instant, deserving of profound compassion, privacy, and lasting dignity. Balancing our intellectual curiosity with an unwavering dedication to human respect ensures that the retelling of dark historical events serves a higher purpose, educating future generations about the importance of empathy and human fragility forevermore today, right here, right now, in our modern world today. The descendants and family members whose lives were directly touched by the Wiley tragedy have spent lifetimes navigating the long, arduous journey toward healing, stability, and emotional recovery far away from the blinding glare of public notoriety. Growing up in the shadow of a sensational murder trial imposes an extraordinary psychological burden on innocent children who bear no personal responsibility for the catastrophic actions of the adults in their world. Their remarkable resilience in forging independent lives, seeking peace, and maintaining personal dignity amid persistent public fascination stands as a powerful testament to the indomitable strength of the human spirit. While the media machine periodically revitalizes a narrative for new audiences, the real human beings affected by the violence have consistently chosen quiet privacy, quiet endurance, and a steady focus on building meaningful lives. Their ability to transcend the dark legacy of the past highlights the profound human capacity for renewal, proving that catastrophe does not have to dictate the entirety of a family story. This quiet triumph over adversity offers a poignant counter-narrative to the theatricality of court dramas, reminding us that genuine recovery is a courageous process rooted in love and peace forevermore today right here. Ultimately, the enduring legacy of this dark historical chapter serves as a profound mirror reflecting our collective vulnerabilities, societal pressures, and the fragile nature of interpersonal harmony. The idyllic suburban facade that once defined the community was not an isolated anomaly, but rather a universal symbol of the ways modern life often prioritizes outward conformity over authentic emotional connection and mental health support. When individuals are forced to suppress their deepest struggles, doubts, and despairs behind a polished mask of perfection, the pressure builds silently until an unexpected flashpoint shatters the illusion into a million irreversible pieces. The tragedy urges us to cultivate communities rooted in radical empathy, open communication, and genuine emotional safety, where people feel truly valued and supported long before desperation mutates into devastating violence. By learning from the profound sorrow of the past, we can foster a world where human vulnerability is met with compassion rather than isolation, ensuring that the lessons of that fateful summer morning are never forgotten as we journey forward into the future together with open hearts and mindful awareness every single day, forevermore today, right here in our world, forevermore today, right here, right now, forevermore today, now. As we bring this extensive 10-part chronicle to its final and definitive conclusion, the enduring echoes of that fateful Texas summer morning will forever reverberate through corridors of true crime history, legal scholarship, and human memory. The 41 blows delivered in that laundry room shattered more than just a single life. They cleave to the comforting illusions of safety, suburban perfection, and predictable human behavior, leaving a permanent scar upon the collective consciousness of society. While time marches relentlessly onward, healing old wounds and reshaping the physical landscapes where these events unfolded, the underlying truths of the tragedy remain vividly intact, serving as a timeless reminder of the profound importance of empathy, the delicate complexity of a human mind, and the absolute necessity of nurturing authentic human connection in a world that can often feel overwhelmingly complex and frightening. May the memories of those whose lives were touched by this profound sorrow guide us toward a more compassionate, understanding, and conscious society, ensuring that the shadows of the past forever illuminate the path toward a safer and more empathetic tomorrow for all humanity now as time marches endlessly onward into bright horizon of endless future days. As we embark upon this final chapter of our comprehensive exploration, the haunting narrative of the Wiley tragedy achieves a permanent, profound stillness within the vast annals of true crime history. The steady accumulation of decades since that fateful June morning in 1980 has transformed a localized Texas nightmare into an enduring cultural archetype, examining the darkest, most unsettling intersections of human behavior, suburban isolation, and sudden primal violence. Yet, beneath the endless layers of legal scholarship, psychological dissection, and popular media retellings, the core of the story remains anchored in an unyielding reality of human sorrow, shattered lives, and irreversible loss. Time possesses a unique and powerful capacity to soften the jagged edges of historical trauma, turning raw horror into distant narrative, but it can never completely erase the foundational gravity of the events that transpire behind those ordinary suburban doors. The town of Wiley has expanded beyond all recognition, its quiet dirt roads replaced by sprawling concrete and modern commercial hubs. But the ghostly echoes of 41 blows continue to resonate to the collective memory of anyone seeking to understand the fragile dimensions of the human experience today, right here in our modern world forevermore. The enduring psychological enigma at the very center of this historic case continues to challenge our fundamental assumptions about human behavior, societal conformity, and the hidden thresholds of endurance. We are culturally conditioned to believe that danger wears an obvious, terrifying face, that monsters are easily distinguished from respectable community members by their visible malice or social deviance. The shocking revelation that a beloved church member, devoted mother, and seemingly model housewife could be at the center of such extreme, unmitigated violence shatters this comforting illusion completely. It forces us to confront the unsettling possibility that extreme stress, emotional starvation, and acute terror can push ordinary minds into terrifying territories where traditional morality and conscious control dissolve into pure survival instinct. Whether one views the pivotal moments in that bloody laundry room through the lens of calculated malice or a sudden, catastrophic dissociative break, the underlying implication remains deeply disturbing. It suggests that the civilized veneer we wear so proudly in public is remarkably thin, supported only by fragile social agreements that can instantly fracture when internal pressures reach a boiling point across our modern world today, right here in this grand epic true crime narrative journey, forevermore today. Beyond individual psychology, the broader sociological dimensions of this narrative offer a piercing critique of the suffocating pressures imposed by suburban culture during that era. The rigid expectations placed upon women demanded an impossible perfection featuring flawless housekeeping, effortless maternal grace, and the cheerful suppression of personal discontent for the sake of marital harmony. Both Betty Gore and Candy Montgomery were caught within the grinding gears of this unrelenting cultural machinery, manifesting their profound internal struggles in radically different ways. Betty wrestled with the isolating weight of postpartum depression and a distant marital dynamic, while Candy saw forbidden thrills to escape the crushing monotony of her prescribed domestic routine. Their fatal collision was not merely an isolated interpersonal conflict, but a catastrophic explosion born from a rigid social system failing to provide safe, compassionate outlets for female vulnerability, mental health crises, or authentic emotional expression. Examining this tragic dynamic reminds contemporary society how vital it is to dismantle toxic structures of perfectionism, fostering instead environments where people feel genuinely supported, seen, and heard long before isolation transforms into irreversible desperation across our world today, right here, right now, in this modern era. Forevermore today, right now, forevermore. As true crime continues its exponential expansion as a dominant cultural phenomenon in the digital age, the ethical responsibilities of storytellers and historians become paramount. The ease with which real human suffering is packaged, distributed, and consumed as evening entertainment creates a dangerous ethical distance between consumer and the raw reality of the tragedy. It is profoundly easy to reduce complex, grieving human beings into static characters within a gripping narrative arc, losing sight of the permanent scars carried by those who survived the violence. True respect for history demands a conscious commitment to empathy, accuracy, and ethical storytelling that honors the victims and their descendants rather than exploiting their pain for cheap theatrical thrills or sensational shock value. We must continually remind ourselves that behind every forensic report, court transcript, and dramatic reenactment lies a real family whose lives were shattered in an instant, deserving of profound compassion, privacy, and lasting dignity. Balancing our intellectual curiosity with an unwavering dedication to human respect ensures that the retelling of dark historical events serves a higher purpose, educating future generations about the importance of empathy and human fragility forevermore today, right here, right now, in our modern world today. The descendants and family members whose lives were directly touched by the Wiley tragedy have spent lifetimes navigating the long, arduous journey toward healing, stability, and emotional recovery far away from the blinding glare of public notoriety. Growing up in the shadow of a sensational murder trial imposes an extraordinary psychological burden on innocent children who bear no personal responsibility for the catastrophic actions of the adults in their world. Their remarkable resilience in forging independent lives, Seeking peace and maintaining personal dignity amid persistent public fascination stands as a powerful testament to the indomitable strength of the human spirit. While the media machine periodically revitalizes a narrative for new audiences, the real human beings affected by the violence have consistently chosen quiet privacy, quiet endurance, and a steady focus on building meaningful lives. Their ability to transcend the dark legacy of the past highlights the profound human capacity for renewal, proving that catastrophe does not have to dictate the entirety of a family story. This quiet triumph over adversity offers a poignant counter-narrative to the theatricality of court dramas, reminding us that genuine recovery is a courageous process rooted in love and peace forevermore today, right here in our hearts. Ultimately, the enduring legacy of this dark historical chapter serves as a profound mirror reflecting our collective vulnerabilities, societal pressures, and the fragile nature of interpersonal harmony. The idyllic suburban facade that once defined the community was not an isolated anomaly, but rather a universal symbol of the ways modern life often prioritizes outward conformity over authentic emotional connection and mental health support. When individuals are forced to suppress their deepest struggles, doubts, and despairs behind a polished mask of perfection, the pressure builds silently until an unexpected flashpoint shatters the illusion into a million irreversible pieces. The tragedy urges us to cultivate communities rooted in radical empathy, open communication, and genuine emotional safety, where people feel truly valued and supported long before desperation mutates into devastating violence. By learning from profound sorrow of the past, we can foster a world where human vulnerability is met with compassion rather than isolation, ensuring that the lessons of that fateful summer morning are never forgotten as we journey forward into the future together with open hearts and mindful awareness every single day, forevermore today, right here in our world, forevermore today, right here, right now, forevermore today, now. As we bring this extensive 11-part chronicle to its absolute final and definitive conclusion, the enduring echoes of that fateful Texas summer morning will forever reverberate through the corridors of true crime history, legal scholarship, and human memory. The 41 blows delivered in that laundry room shattered more than just a single life. They cleave to the comforting illusions of safety, suburban perfection, and predictable human behavior, leaving a permanent scar upon the collective consciousness of society. While time marches relentlessly onward, healing old wounds and reshaping the physical landscapes where these events unfolded, the underlying truths of the tragedy remain vividly intact, serving as a timeless reminder of the profound importance of empathy, the delicate complexity of the human mind, and the absolute necessity of nurturing authentic human connection in a world that can often feel overwhelmingly complex and frightening. May the memories of those whose lives were touched by this profound sorrow guide us toward a more compassionate, understanding, and conscious society, ensuring that the shadows of the past forever illuminate the path toward a safer and more empathetic tomorrow for all humanity now as time marches endlessly onward into bright horizon of endless future days.